The morning light struggled through the mist, its pale fingers reaching across the flooded fields that bordered the old county road. Inside a battered rescue truck, the air smelled of damp wool, coffee, and worn leather. Maya kept her eyes fixed on the wavering horizon while the windshield wipers fought against the drizzle. The radio hissed before a static-filled voice broke through, another call from dispatch. Possible animal distress reported near Millstone Swamp. White horse severely neglected. She didn't hesitate. With a sharp twist of the wheel, she turned down the narrow dirt road that wound through the marshland, her heart tightening in a familiar ache. The drive felt longer than it was, every bump echoing through her bones. Beside her sat Lucas, a quiet volunteer barely out of his 20s, glancing nervously at the map on his lap. He'd been with the rescue team only a few months, but he'd already seen more cruelty than he'd ever imagined existed. "You think it's still alive?" he asked softly. Maya didn't answer right away. "If it's breathing, we'll find it," she finally said, her voice steady but distant. When they reached the end of the road, the truck's headlights cut through the fog, revealing a scene that silenced them both. The field stretched endlessly, half swallowed by tall reeds and murky pools. Then, movement, a faint tremor near a fallen tree. Maya stepped out first, her boots sinking into the cold mud. The air was heavy with rot and silence. She motioned for Lucas to stay back as she advanced slowly, her breath visible in the chill. The shape in the grass came into focus, a horse or what was left of one. Its once white coat was stained yellow and brown, its skin crawling with parasites that fed mercilessly on the wounds beneath. Each rib was drawn sharply against its frame like the strings of an unplayed instrument. The creature lifted its head weakly, revealing eyes dulled by exhaustion but not yet surrendered. Something in that gaze made Maya stop. It wasn't fear. It was endurance. She crouched a few feet away, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hey there, boy. You're safe now." The horse flicked an ear, muscles trembling as if unsure whether to believe her. She inched closer, speaking softly, every word deliberate and calm. The distant sound of the truck door closing made the horse flinch violently, struggling to rise but collapsing again in the wet grass. Maya froze, letting the silence stretch until his breathing steadied. Lucas approached slowly with a blanket and a halter, his face pale. "He's bad," he murmured. "Worse than the ones last month." Maya nodded without looking at him. "Get the sling ready. We're not leaving him here." The horse's sides heaved, each breath a battle. His mane, tangled and gray with filth, draped over one eye. When she finally touched him, lightly, on the neck, he didn't pull away. The skin twitched beneath her hand, but there was no fight left in him, only trust, fragile and new. As they worked, the fog thickened until the world shrank to a circle of pale light from their lantern. The air buzzed with insects, and every sound seemed magnified. The snap of a rope, the rustle of reeds, the faint groan of the horse as they shifted his weight onto the stretcher. Maya's hands trembled once, just once, when she brushed away a clump of matted hair and saw the raw skin beneath. She whispered, "We'll fix this. I promise." It took nearly an hour to lift him into the trailer. The effort left them drenched in sweat and mud, but they never spoke of stopping. When the doors finally shut, Maya leaned against the metal, catching her breath. She turned to Lucas. He's still got fight in him. "That's enough." Lucas wiped his forehead and glanced through the small window at the frail creature inside. "What'll we call him?" Maya hesitated, then said quietly, "Ghost." It fit, the pale, almost translucent coat, the way he'd appeared out of the mist like something lost between life and death. The drive back to the sanctuary was silent except for the hum of the tires on wet gravel. Every few minutes, Maya checked the rearview mirror, watching Ghost's shadow shift faintly in the dim light. The road twisted through empty farmland, past barns collapsing under their own weight. The sky had begun to lighten, streaked with faint gold that broke through the clouds. It felt wrong that something so fragile had been left alone in that darkness for so long. Halfway home, the truck hit a bump, and Ghost stirred, letting out a low, broken whinny. Maya reached back, fingers brushing the metal bars of the trailer gate. "You're okay," she said softly. "Almost there." It wasn't just reassurance for him. It was something she needed to believe herself. When they reached the sanctuary, the air smelled of hay and rain. Other horses shifted in their stalls, their ears pricking as the trailer backed into place. Volunteers gathered, their expressions turning from curiosity to shock when they saw what had arrived. "Dear God," someone whispered. Maya ignored the murmurs. She opened the trailer door slowly, letting Ghost see the warm light spilling from the stable. He hesitated, muscles locking in fear. She stepped closer until her shoulder nearly touched his, murmuring under her breath, "You can walk now. No one will hurt you again." It took patience, coaxing, and gentle persistence, but finally he moved, one shaky step at a time until his hooves touched solid ground. Inside the stable, the air was warm, filled with the soft noises of horses shifting, the smell of straw, and safety. Ghost stood still, head bowed, trembling with exhaustion. Maya wrapped the blanket around his back, feeling the fragile warmth of life still pulsing beneath her hands. When the others drifted away, she stayed, kneeling beside him. The dim light from the hanging lamp painted her face in amber tones, shadows tracing the lines of fatigue beneath her eyes. She spoke quietly, not sure if she was talking to him or to herself. "You made it. That's the hardest part." The horse's ear twitched. His breathing slowed. She reached out and let her fingers rest against his cheek. For a moment his eyes met hers, still clouded but with a faint spark of recognition. Something passed between them, something wordless but real. It wasn't gratitude yet, not trust either, but something in between, the first fragile thread of connection between two broken survivors. When she finally stood, the fog outside had lifted. The night was clear, the air crisp, and above the sanctuary roof, a pale slice of moon glowed faintly against the stars. Maya looked back at the stall one last time before switching off the light. Ghost was lying down now, his breathing steady, his head resting on the straw. She closed the door gently, the latch clicking in the silence. As she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just another rescue. It was the beginning of something neither of them could yet understand. A story that would test the limits of healing, and perhaps of faith itself. Morning sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of the stable window, spilling over the straw in rippled patterns of gold. The scent of antiseptic and hay mingled in the quiet air. Ghost lay curled in the corner of his stall, his white coat dulled to gray beneath a film of dust. He stirred faintly as Maya entered, her boots making soft impressions in the straw. In her hands, she carried a bucket of warm water and a handful of oats. Her movements were practiced, but her eyes betrayed a fatigue that had settled deep in her bones. She had barely slept since the rescue, haunted by the image of that frail body trembling in the swamp's mist. Ghost raised his head when she knelt beside him. His ears flicked forward, uncertain, then back again. He was learning her smell, the rhythm of her breathing, the gentle way she spoke. She set the bucket down and reached toward him with quiet patience. The first time she'd tried to touch him, he had pulled away sharply, fear flashing through his hollow eyes. Now he stayed still, wary but willing. "That's it, boy," she whispered. "You remember me." He blinked slowly, nostrils flaring as he sniffed the air near her hand. Each day followed a fragile routine. Maya would clean his wounds with warm saline, her fingers steady despite the stench of infection. The vet, Dr. Rowan, visited every morning, his voice low and deliberate as he examined Ghost's thin frame. "He's still dehydrated," he said one day, pressing his palm against the horse's ribs. "But he's got heart. That's rare." Maya nodded, her eyes never leaving Ghost's. "Heart's all we need." Rowan smiled faintly, though his expression carried doubt. Days turned to weeks. Ghost began to eat more, his appetite cautious but growing. The parasites were gone now, thanks to endless treatments and careful grooming. His mane, once knotted with filth, began to show a faint shimmer of silver white. But progress came slowly, and every small victory felt like a battle won against something unseen. Maya knew that survival was more than flesh healing. It was about breaking the walls of fear that cruelty had built inside him. At night, she often sat by his stall, her notebook open on her knees. She recorded his habits, his reactions, his silences. Yet sometimes her pen would stop moving. She would watch him breathe, each rise and fall of his chest rhythmic and grounding. In those quiet hours, memories returned, her childhood horse, Snowfire, and the fire that had taken him, the smell of smoke, the sound of hooves against burning wood, the helplessness. She had sworn never to let another creature suffer alone again. But in Ghost's trembling body she saw the same fragility, the same need for protection she once failed to give. One evening, while the sanctuary was quiet and the sky burned orange beyond the trees, Maya decided it was time to let Ghost walk. The vet had warned her he wasn't ready, but something in his posture had changed. He stood taller now, weight shifting evenly between his legs. She opened the stall gate, speaking softly. "Just a few steps. You can do it." Ghost hesitated, head turning toward her as if questioning the command. His hooves pressed into the straw, uncertain at first, then steady. Each movement was a struggle, but he persisted, driven by an instinct stronger than pain. Maya stepped back to give him space. The light caught his coat as he moved, and for the first time, she saw what he might have looked like before. The graceful arch of his neck, the silent strength in his eyes. He took another step, and another, until he reached the open paddock. The air outside was cool, scented with earth and rain. Ghost stopped there, breathing deeply, his nostrils flaring as if tasting freedom. Maya felt her chest tighten. For a moment, neither of them moved. The world seemed suspended, and in that stillness she saw the faint outline of hope. But hope was fragile. The next morning she found him standing rigid, sides heaving, eyes wide with terror. The sound of a distant engine had triggered something buried deep inside him. He kicked against the stall door, nostrils flaring, panic taking over reason. Maya rushed in, arms raised to calm him. "Hey, easy," she called out, her voice low but firm. He didn't hear her, not really. In his mind he was somewhere else, trapped, abandoned, helpless. The sight broke her heart. She pressed her hand against his chest, whispering over and over until his breathing slowed. When he finally stilled, his body trembled like a leaf. That night, she didn't leave his side. The others suggested sedatives, but she refused. Instead, she spoke to him softly in the darkness, telling him about the other rescues, about the lives that had changed. Her words weren't for him alone. They were for herself, too. "You've got a reason to keep going," she said, her fingers brushing his mane. "You just don't know it yet." His eyes, half closed, reflected the lamplight. For the first time, he leaned into her touch. Days passed, and his confidence began to grow again. The sanctuary volunteers started calling him the ghost that lived. Children visiting the rescue center would peer through the gate, their small voices full of awe. Maya didn't allow anyone to touch him yet. Trust was still a fragile thing, but she could see the way Ghost watched the world now. Not with fear, but curiosity. One morning, Dr. Rowan arrived with new findings. While examining Ghost, he pointed to the faint scars around his neck. "These aren't from parasites," he said grimly. "They're from a rope. Someone tied him up. Maybe left him there." The words hung in the air like smoke. Maya's jaw tightened. So someone did this to him on purpose. Rowan didn't answer, but his silence said everything. That night, Maya sat by Ghost's stall again, unable to shake the image from her mind. "You weren't lost," she whispered. "You were left." The truth deepened her resolve. Saving Ghost wasn't just about healing his wounds anymore. It was about justice, about making sure no creature suffered like this again. She began documenting his recovery in earnest, filming short clips for awareness campaigns. The footage showed his transformation, the dull coat brightening, the hollow frame filling with life. In one clip, Ghost lifted his head proudly against the wind. The sanctuary's followers online called it miraculous. But Maya knew the real miracle was simpler. Ghost had chosen to trust again. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the pastures, Ghost approached her without hesitation. He nuzzled her shoulder, his breath warm against her skin. The gesture was small but carried a weight words couldn't hold. Maya smiled, tears gathering in her eyes. "You're learning, aren't you?" she whispered. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint hum of the world beyond the sanctuary, the world that had once forgotten him. Ghost lifted his head toward it but didn't shy away. Maya watched him, realizing how far they both had come. The broken creature she had found in the swamp was gone, replaced by something resilient and alive. As darkness fell, she turned off the stable lights and lingered at the door. Ghost shifted his weight, lowering his head as if in quiet acknowledgement. "Good night, boy," she said softly. Outside, the sky was a deep shade of indigo, stars pricking through like scattered promises. She took one last look back before walking away, unaware that the faint traces of his past, those scars and memories, were about to lead her into a truth far darker than either of them was ready to face. Rain hammered against the tin roof of the sanctuary, a rhythmic pulse that filled every corner of the stables. Maya stood at the edge of Ghost's stall, watching the way the stormlight flickered across his coat. The air smelled of damp wood and hay, heavy with the metallic tang of approaching thunder. Ghost was restless tonight. His muscles trembled beneath his pale skin, his eyes wide and unfocused as if he were trapped in a memory only he could see. The first flash of lightning cracked across the sky, and he reared suddenly, slamming his hooves against the gate with a sound that split the silence. Maya lunged forward before instinct told her to pause. His panic wasn't random. Something deep, primal, was waking inside him. "Easy, Ghost," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "It's just a storm." But even as she said it, she knew storms were rarely just weather for creatures with scars like his. The next thunderclap sent him sideways, muscles straining against the wood, eyes wild with fear. Maya entered the stall slowly, her heart thudding in sync with the storm outside. She moved to his side, one hand raised, her voice steady despite the chaos. "I'm here," she said. "You're safe." His breathing came in sharp bursts, his body slick with sweat. She stood beside him until his panic began to fade, until the tremors softened into quiet exhaustion. He pressed his head weakly against her shoulder, a gesture that broke something open inside her. When the storm passed, the sanctuary settled into an uneasy calm. The volunteers whispered about Ghost's outburst, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling that it had meant something more. The next day, she examined him under the soft light of morning. His scars seemed more pronounced now, dark lines against pale fur. As she brushed his neck, her fingers paused over one, the rope mark Dr. Rowan had mentioned. It wasn't just a rope burn. It was too precise, too deep. It looked deliberate. The realization chilled her. Later that afternoon, she sat in the small office at the back of the barn, scrolling through local records. Reports of abandoned horses, police notes on animal cruelty, old breeder complaints. Most were unremarkable until she stumbled across a name: Harlan Tate. The document detailed a case closed years ago, a farm shut down for neglect, dozens of horses sold off or left to die. Her pulse quickened as she read the description. White stallion, approximately 6 years old, unaccounted for at the time of closure. Her stomach turned. Ghost wasn't just a rescue. He was a survivor from a place that had been hell for his kind. That evening, she told Rowan what she'd found. The vet leaned back in his chair, his expression darkening. "Tate still lives out by Hollow Ridge," he said. "Keeps a few animals. Claims he changed." Maya's voice tightened. "Changed?" "He left Ghost tied to a tree to die." Rowan sighed, rubbing his temples. "Maya, we can't accuse without proof. You start digging into his past, you could make things worse. For you and the sanctuary." But she had already made up her mind. The next morning, she drove out to Hollow Ridge. The land was barren, lined with rusting fences and broken machinery. A thin layer of fog clung to the fields like smoke. She parked at the edge of the property, her boots crunching against gravel as she approached the weathered farmhouse. Harlan Tate stepped out before she could knock. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face worn from sun and bitterness. "You lost?" he asked, voice rough as gravel. Maya stood her ground. "I run the Millstone Sanctuary. We rescued a horse, white, scarred. He came from your old property, didn't he?" Tate's eyes narrowed, a flicker of recognition passing through them before he hid it behind a sneer. "You people think you can save everything," he said. "Some animals just ain't worth the trouble." The words struck her like a slap. She clenched her fists, forcing her tone to stay level. "He survived what you did. That makes him stronger than you'll ever understand." Tate laughed, a hollow, humorless sound. Strong, he was weak. Couldn't work, couldn't breed. "I cut my losses." He turned to leave, but she called after him, her voice trembling with restrained fury. "He's alive because you failed to kill what was pure." Tate stopped, glancing back over his shoulder. "Then you better pray he stays that way," he said before walking into the house and slamming the door. Maya stood there in the silence, rain beginning to fall again, soaking through her jacket. Her hands shook, but not from fear, from rage. She drove back in silence, the windshield wipers scraping rhythmically as her thoughts spiraled. Tate's cruelty had left more than scars. It had carved trauma into the living. Ghost's fear of thunder, his panic at loud sounds, they all traced back to that man. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, whispering to herself, "He'll never touch another animal again." When she returned, Ghost was waiting at the stall door, as if sensing her turmoil. She approached him, her eyes softer now but heavy with emotion. "You knew, didn't you?" she said quietly. "You remembered." He lowered his head toward her chest, breathing deeply. She rested her forehead against his, closing her eyes. "It's over now," she whispered, though she wasn't sure she believed it. Over the next few days, Ghost's recovery accelerated. He moved with strength, his muscles filling out beneath the once-starved frame. Yet, beneath his progress, Maya could see the lingering shadows of his past. Every creak of thunderclouds made his ears twitch. Every metallic clang sent tension down his spine. Healing, she realized, wasn't a straight path. It was a series of small surrenders and quiet victories. One afternoon, she led him into the open paddock. The air was cool, washed clean after the rain. Ghost stood tall now, his coat shimmering in the sunlight. Maya unlatched the lead rope, giving him space. He hesitated only for a moment before stepping forward, hooves sinking into soft earth. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, he began to run. His mane streamed behind him, his movements fluid, free, alive. The sound of his hooves echoed through the fields like a heartbeat. Maya watched, tears catching in her lashes, as the broken creature she had once lifted from the mud now moved with strength and grace. But just as she began to smile, something shifted in the distance, a figure standing by the fence line, watching. Her heart stilled. The man was too far to see clearly, but she knew that posture, that stillness. Tate. The sunlight glinted off the metal of his truck before he turned and drove away. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She stood by Ghost's stall, watching him doze peacefully. Her mind replayed Tate's words, his cold indifference. There was still danger out there, still cruelty lurking in the shadows beyond their sanctuary's fences. She ran her hand down Ghost's neck, whispering, "No one will ever take your peace again." Outside, the crickets sang beneath the stars, and the night felt deceptively calm. Yet, in the quiet hum of the sanctuary, something had changed. The world beyond was stirring again, pulling at the edges of their fragile safety. Maya could feel it in her bones. A storm far greater than the one that had passed was coming. And when it did, both she and Ghost would be forced to face not just the ghosts of their past, but the truth that healing always demands a price. Rain fell softly over the hills as dawn broke across the rescue ranch. Emma stood at the stable door, watching the white horse, now named Spirit, move gracefully in the morning light. The wounds that once scarred his body had healed into faint marks, reminders of where he had come from. His mane, once dull and tangled, now shimmered like threads of silver. Yet, despite his transformation, Emma could see something still lingered in his eyes, a quiet fear, a hesitance to fully trust the world again. She knew healing wasn't only about the body. It was the soul that took the longest to mend. Over the weeks, Spirit had grown stronger. His muscles filled out, his movements became fluid, and he began to interact with other horses. Still, whenever someone new approached, he would step back, nostrils flaring, eyes wide with uncertainty. Emma worked patiently with him every day, never forcing a touch or command, only offering calm presence. She spoke softly, her voice like a lullaby carried on the wind. "It's okay, Spirit," she would whisper. "You're safe now." The rescue team often came by to check on him, documenting his progress. Each visit filled the ranch with quiet pride, especially Jake, the youngest rescuer, who had been there the night they found Spirit. He had never forgotten the sight of that frail, parasite-covered horse lying in the mud, barely breathing. Now, seeing Spirit stand tall, Jake felt something shift inside him. It wasn't just another successful rescue. It was proof of hope reborn. "He looks like a different animal," Jake said one morning, leaning on the fence beside Emma. She smiled faintly, eyes still fixed on Spirit. "He is, but deep down he's the same soul, just finally learning to trust again." But fate wasn't done testing them. One night, a violent storm rolled in from the north, tearing through the valley. Lightning split the sky as thunder shook the ground. The horses panicked, kicking their stalls and neighing wildly. When Emma rushed to the barn, she found Spirit's gate open. The latch must have failed under the wind. Her heart dropped. Grabbing a raincoat and flashlight, she ran into the storm, calling his name into the roaring wind. "Spirit, where are you?" Her voice cracked, drowned by the thunder. Mud clung to her boots as she stumbled across the pasture, the beam of her flashlight cutting through sheets of rain. She finally spotted him on the far hill, trembling near the broken fence. A fallen tree had scared him, trapping his way back. His eyes were wide again with the same terror she'd seen the day they found him. Emma approached slowly, whispering over the rain. "It's me, Spirit. You're okay. You're safe." The horse pawed at the ground, backing away, his breath coming in quick bursts. Each flash of lightning sent him shuddering. Emma's chest tightened. One wrong move and he could bolt into the woods. She took a deep breath and did something risky. She dropped the flashlight, letting the darkness swallow them. The storm still raged, but her voice became his only guide. "I'm not going to hurt you. Remember the mornings? The calm ones. You trust me, don't you?" Her tone was steady, anchored in love. Spirit's ears flicked forward. He took one hesitant step, then another. When he finally reached her, his nose brushed her shoulder and Emma felt tears mix with the rain. She slipped a rope gently over his neck and led him home through the storm. By morning, the sky was clear again, painted in gold and rose. The ranch lay soaked but safe, and Spirit was back in his stall, exhausted but calm. The rescue team gathered later that day to see him. Jake shook his head in disbelief. "You went out there in that storm?" Emma chuckled weakly. "He would have done the same for me if he could." From that day forward, Spirit changed. The fear in his eyes began to fade completely. When visitors came to the ranch, he didn't shy away anymore. Children could pet his muzzle. Volunteers could brush his coat. Emma noticed how he would often stay near her, watching her work, almost as if guarding her in return. There was an unspoken bond between them, born from fear, strengthened through trust, and sealed by that stormy night. Months later, the rescue center hosted an open day to raise awareness about neglected animals. Spirit was chosen as their symbol of recovery. Emma led him into the paddock as a crowd gathered. Cameras clicked and whispers spread. Everyone knew his story, how a dying horse had turned into a symbol of strength. Emma gave a short speech, her hand resting on Spirit's neck. "This horse taught me something," she began, her voice steady but full of emotion. "Healing isn't about what's lost. It's about what can still be found when you refuse to give up." Spirit didn't just survive. He reminded us all why we rescue, why we fight for second chances. As applause echoed, Spirit lifted his head high, mane rippling in the wind. The crowd fell silent for a brief, awe-filled moment. It was as if they all felt what Emma did, that the horse before them was more than flesh and bone. He was hope, standing tall. That night, after everyone had left, Emma sat by Spirit's stall, brushing his mane under the soft hum of lantern light. The ranch was quiet, the air cool and filled with the scent of hay. Spirit nuzzled her shoulder gently, his breath warm against her skin. "You did it," she whispered. "You're free now." His eyes, once haunted, now gleamed with peace. Outside, the stars spread wide across the sky, silent witnesses to a story that had begun in pain and ended in redemption. Spirit turned toward the open fields beyond the ranch fence, his ears twitching as if listening to some faraway call. One day, Emma thought, maybe he would run free again. But for now, he stayed by her side, where trust had taken root and turned into something unbreakable. And as the screen fades to black, a single line appears. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing. I bring true, heartfelt stories every day.